Namo Phat, good morning. Thanks for joining me for a daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. The fourth mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I vow to cultivate loving speech and deep listening in order to bring joy and happiness to others and to relieve others of their suffering. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I'm determined to speak truthfully, with words that inspire self-confidence, joy, and hope. I will not spread news I do not know to be certain. I will not criticize or condemn things of which I am not sure. I will refrain from uttering words that can cause division or discord, that can cause the family or the community to break. I am determined to make all efforts to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. For our Dharma lesson this morning, we're reading Watching a World Arise. And this is by Ajahn Amaro from his book Catastrophe, Apostrophe. As we look about us in life, we can discover, oh, the woman in the next seat who I thought was a primary school teacher is actually a famous film director. Or that fellow who I met in the park, who I was sure was a scientist, turns out he's a sculptor. We can watch how our version of the world comes into being. It is not good, it is not bad, it is just this. Every day there is a great opportunity to see a world being born, seeing how we judge our own life, our personality, judge the lives of others. We can watch those patterns, those perceptions, springing up and taking shape and dissolving. The senses, contact, and feelings arise. If we are able to recognize that the world is actually my version of the world, then we are able to be much more sensitive and spacious in the way we relate to others. In one very significant teaching, the Buddha said that whereby one is a perceiver of the world, a conceiver of the world, that is called the world in this Dhamma and discipline. And what is the means whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world? It is the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. We can see how those perceptions arise and how the mind can give them value. How do we feel about other people? The perception of scientist has one feeling, sculptor has another feeling. We create each other. We produce different judgments and perceptions out of habit, out of our conditioning, out of our social situation. We tend to believe our perceptions are absolutely true, but we can be aware that this is a creation or a naming that the mind has put upon perceptions of the present. As Ajahn Chah put it, we determine things into existence. This awareness gives a great freedom to our own heart, and it gives great freedom to others as well. The kindest thing you can do for other people is not to create them, just as the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is not to create this person that we think we are either. This might sound a bit strange, but on reflection, perhaps it makes some sense. It is a great relief not to be created into a particular role. There's a friend of the Sangha in California who is quadriplegic in a wheelchair. He once told me how one of the great happiness in his life was when people would talk to him and not talk to the chair. So as we receive the world into our hearts and we watch it come into being, each moment a useful exercise in developing compassion, kindness, and harmonious relationships, is to not create people. This doesn't mean that when your grandchildren come running through the door saying they're happy to see you, you tell them they don't exist. If a child is 5 years old and Granny tells her that she is not real, that child will probably think that Buddhism is bad for Granny. The practice being spoken of here is not the picking up of some philosophical idea and then brandishing it as a concept to identify with, an achievement or a self-protection. Rather, it is expanding the view. It is relaxing expectations and projections and opening the heart to the fullness of the present reality. If we make the effort not to create each other, we can see what the effect of that is. Be attentive, attune to that present reality. We then let our words and actions and feelings be guided by that attunement. I encourage us all to look into our hearts to see how this feels. The freedom of non-creation, the freedom of not judging others as being this or that, the freedom of not having to be someone special. I would like to tell a story about one particular friend of the Sangha who used to visit Chithurst Monastery back in the early 1980s. In those days, the old Victorian house was a building site. The floors had only scraps of leftover carpet to cover them. Most of the tea mugs didn't have handles or had chips in the sides. It was a pretty rough environment. This friend of the Sangha was a local woman who used to come and visit regularly. She had been married to the British ambassador to Japan. When she came to visit, she would sit down quite delicately on the scraps of carpet, sip her tea daintily from the chip mug. She was obviously a very refined lady. One day she said, "The reason I love to come to Chithurst is because here I can be a potato." And she really meant it. She didn't have to be the ambassador's wife or the gracious lady. She could just enjoy the company of good friends and sip her tea and not care that the cup was chipped or the place was covered in paint and plaster dust. What a delight not to have to be this thing, this role, this identity. How joyful to be able to let that go, unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thanks for joining me today.